Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, from wherever you're joining us. Many of you would have heard of this line, or rather this statement, where they say, if you think that building a reputation in a business takes 20 years, a cyber incident will let you lose that reputation in 5 seconds. You see, often when we have conversations around cybersecurity, and you see a lot of folks who sort of dodge the question to the effect of saying something like, it's an IT issue, or maybe it's something that a specific department can deal with. These kind of conversations really take us away from the basic principle of cybersecurity not being one particular individual's responsibility, but everyone's. Often I've heard some folks say, hey, this is an IT issue, and I often respond back by saying that's akin to saying that everybody below the CEO, everybody there is an HR issue. Not quite true in the case. Today's conversation is going to focus on how cybersecurity has become a matter for all levels of the organization. You would have heard me in previous Power Hours when I've said the statement, often I've said AI, for example, is another member of your org chart. And when I think of cybersecurity, not only do I think it's a member of your org chart, I think it's a member of your board of directors, or at least your board of advisors. My name is Ali Hirji, and you know me from my work at Durham College, both in AI and cybersecurity, and I'm a proud lead of the Cyber Exchange Advisory. You're joining me live today from the town of Ajax at the beautiful St. Francis Center. I believe it's very important for me to acknowledge the fact that we're on the land of the peoples of the Mississaugas of the Scugog First Nations Island. This land is protected and governed under the Williams Treaties. My guest today is a fellow Cyber Exchange Advisory Committee member, somebody who I've got to know very closely over the last month, and more importantly, somebody who speaks about cybersecurity not from one perspective, but multiple. Often we talk about the fact that education may be bitter, but the fruits of it are very sweet. And my guest today is a very neat personification of exactly that. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Qureshi, who is the founder and CEO of QSI Security. Sarah, welcome to the Power Hour.
Thank you.
Sarah, I was reading a little bit about your own background, both from an academic perspective and a work perspective, very diverse. What got you to this point to start your own organization and lead virtual CISO services, not just in Canada, but across North America?
Good question. It's a long journey. It started with being a programmer, and my first job right out of school was a security analyst for Atomic Energy of Canada.
Yep.
I knew nothing about security until that day when I started that job. They did a full 10-year background check on me, and they threw me in the deep end on day one. Right. And essentially, I was one of the 3 members of security for Atomic Energy. And at that time, the teams were really small.
Yep.
So the journey started there, and then I basically said, I need to learn more and more and more. And throughout the years, I could never put it behind me that I want to specialize in security. It became my passion. Privacy became my passion. Yep. Protecting kids from what's out there on the internet, or at least informing them, became my passion. And then I pursued my degree in security. And after that, it's just been a very rapid journey into where I am today.
I've often held this belief that information is what you know, knowledge is how you act on what you know. How have you played a role in making sure that organizations can act on everything it is that you know from your experience?
Right, so every organization is slightly unique,
Yep.
but one of the things that I find is that every organization needs to understand their risk exposure. And for that, you need to fully understand the business first, put security tools and technologies behind in the conversation for a second, understand what the business needs, what is the risk they're exposed to, quantify that risk, prioritize that risk, help everybody in the organization understand that risk, and then you can talk about mitigation. You don't jump into solutioning, is my experience. You understand the problem, you understand the business, you understand the risk, and then you understand how do you mitigate the risk.
That's a fascinating exposure into the lines of thought around how do you quantify risk, how do you qualify risk, and more importantly than that, how do you make a determination from a budget standpoint? How do you make decisions in terms of what's worth spending on and what's worth kind of letting go?
Again, it's not just my decision.
Right.
It's a collective decision. My way of working is very collaborative. I basically present from cybersecurity perspective what is it that the organizations need to consider? And it always works hand in hand with technology roadmap, the organization's mandate of growth, how do they want to grow, what do they want to do from business perspective. So it's never isolated. If somebody comes in and they say that this is an isolated security problem, that's usually not the case. It's never a little technology problem. It's never a teeny tiny, oh, this is the vulnerability, we better fix it today. Yep. It's always a bigger picture that smaller tasks fit into.
I don't know if you'd necessarily agree with me when I say this, but I've often held a mantra true to my heart, which is the idea that growing is painful. As we grow in our careers, it's painful to let go of previous positions, previous colleagues, previous institutions. But you've made that journey. I want to take a little bit of a back step and talk a little bit more about your career progression. And when was that moment that you realized, I want to do something on my own and engage with multiple companies as opposed to stay true to just one alone?
Right. So every client for me is the client in the moment when I'm dealing with them. Yep. They are it. If I'm there, if I'm on the table, they are everything for me. So I basically try to produce an outcome for them. The reason why I decided to go on my own and help many people is that even in one client's case, when I learned something, it applies to many clients.
Absolutely.
I can take that knowledge and I can actually share it with other people as well. So throughout the years, what I've noticed is there's common knowledge that can be transferred through not by just working with one client at a time, but basically putting a whole team around that whole structure and allowing every client to benefit from what we've learned over the years.
The key word that you use, at least for me, that resonates is the idea of common. And I think you've heard this quite a lot, and it definitely plays a lot in the community circles that we belong in, is common sense being very uncommon. This idea of going to become a virtual CISO, and I'll take a little bit of a back step just so that our audience can remember this, is about a week ago, we had Michael Ball, who's also a virtual CISO. And one of the things that he pointed out to was the fact that this idea of a virtual CISO was something that wasn't quite digestible to many folks. I mean, we sort of paralleled with the call center world, and we were talking about Thomas Friedman, the world is flat. And this idea that certain services, like servicing your vacuum cleaner, a call center agent can adorn different auras and different personalities, from a British accent to an Indian accent, from Kapoor to Cooper very easily. But that doesn't quite translate easily for a C-suite-like position. I asked the same question to Michael Ball, and I'll ask it to you as well, with a couple of other additional layers. First one being, what was it like when you said, hey, I know you need a CISO-like service, you need a CISO-level individual, I want to offer it to you as a service. Better yet, I want to offer it to you virtually.
Right. So the way the world is changing, a lot of the services are going to be virtual. The fact that it's a virtual CISO role today, titled as virtual CISO, it's not so unique. We've always actually used different services, remote services. There have been consultants working from all over the world. What's unique about a CISO role to be virtual is usually C-suite is not considered to be plug and play.
Right.
So over the years, what I've learned and I've observed is that what I've learned from one company and brought that to the other company, it's very beneficial. Because if you work in a company for a long time, you kind of miss out on every other company and what is it that they're doing? How are they fixing the problem? So what's happened is with me, my exposure has allowed me to see many companies fixing the same issue or addressing the same problem, cybersecurity risk management issue. So it's given me an edge to walk into a company and say, hey, this is how a company, your profile, neighboring company is doing it, and this is how you can adopt it. So a lot of the frameworks are not prescriptive. They're not plug and play. You can't just become compliant by what I call it checkbox security. You can't just say check, check, check. It all needs to be tailored to the client, their business, and it all needs to be quantified first to say this is the risk and this is how you address it. If you skip those parts and if you dive right into tactical fixes, you'll spend a lot of time doing just that and nothing strategic would be put in place.
I want to sort of unpack that just a little bit more, and you've brought up this very interesting statement, which I think we should put on a t-shirt, which is be aware of checkbox security. But I would also argue that there is, for at least small to medium businesses, there is this element of the black box of security, them not knowing what it is that they're getting into. And let's look at that and transport it into the times that we're in right now. Overnight, companies were left with no option but to innovate, but to go remote. And now, especially for the SMB sector, the world became this place where they had to think about the realities of what a hack could mean or a data breach could mean to their, for example, their little shop that sells cakes or whatever.
Right.
How do you help organizations get started in understanding their security posture?
So one thing I do very differently is I don't agree with scare people into thinking they need security. You have to help people understand why they need security.
Yep.
So this is where I find myself slightly having a different view than my colleagues in the industry. I believe in helping people understand more so than be scared of what they need to do. People shouldn't have to put security controls in place because they're scared of being attacked. I walk in and I basically say, you are being attacked already. If you don't know it, that's a different story. You're already under attack, but you need to figure out how to protect yourself from a catastrophe. And for that, you need to clearly articulate that this is the risk, this is how you unravel it, this is how you look at it, so you put monitoring in place. If the monitoring isn't there, you wouldn't even know you're being attacked. So you have to basically apply something called layered security. But first, the very first step is helping organizations understand why is it important for you to invest in security. That's the first question. If a business says, we've never been hacked, we don't need to spend money on it, we don't even want to look at it, that does not mean they're not prone to an attack that will take them down, that will impact their reputation, their revenue, so on and so forth. So my goal is to help people understand in layman's terms, in simpler terminology, not the jargon that we use that scares regular business owners away from even having the conversation. So this is where that element of make it simple to understand. Why do you need security?
You know, I think it was about a week ago, or maybe a little bit more than that, I was speaking to Shireen Nasher, who's on our advisory. She's a security lead at KPMG.
Okay.
And we sort of settled on this Persian statement which says, you know, fear is the most expensive, or sort of not the most expensive, but fear is one of the cheapest rooms in the hotel. I'd like you to improve your living conditions. And this idea of breaking away from that fear, this idea of not necessarily preaching about cybersecurity or talking about cybersecurity in that something is out to get you, but more from a perspective of you need to be proactively aware of your scenarios. What do you think has changed in how companies are now positioning themselves from a security perspective in light of the pandemic?
Right, so a lot of people have gone into the tactical response to it. They were not given the lead time to be proactive about how to take care of their employees when they're outside the premise. So the perimeter has changed entirely for every single organization that's allowing remote work. So first you have to understand, if you're strengthening your perimeter definition just changed.
Yeah.
So first you have to understand that that's changed. Then if you accept that change, sometimes change is hard to accept, but if you accept that change, you can then start thinking about it differently. It's been a change, a shift in mindset, but a forced shift in mindset because nobody got the time to say, okay, lockdown is coming in 6 months or 8 months. It just happened, and we reacted to it. Some organizations were well prepared. They had disaster recovery plans in place. They had business continuity in place. They understood if an employee isn't in the premise of the organization, and if they go outside, if they work from any other part of the world, they had already taken care of that scenario. Not every organization was as lucky, but they did react, and they've adapted.
Understood. Now, I want to go back to this adaptivity and this ability to sort of realize that anything when it comes to security is not set in stone. I've said this repeatedly. It's sort of set in jello. How do you manipulate your way through, and I wouldn't even say manipulate, navigate your way through all of the challenges and the changing environments?
Great question. The reason why I'm in security is because it's ever-changing. No 2 days are exactly the same. Yes, you have the frameworks. Yes, you have standard practices, best practices which you bring in. Even the best practices change as somebody says, okay, SHA-1 is not secure anymore, now we're going to SHA-2, SHA-3, so on and so forth. So you have to be ready for change. And somebody gave me the best advice. I first became a consultant a few years ago, several years ago actually, and they told me to get comfortable with the discomfort of how quickly security changes. And I did. So now I anticipate change. I anticipate organizations to spin around, change their mandate, change their agenda. Sometimes the threat that comes on the surface is so severe that people have to react to it. They don't have enough time to say, okay, we've proactively managed it already. They have to be tactical, but address it right off the bat.
You know, out of all of these power hours that I've been doing, it's been such a phenomenal experience for me because, yeah, I assume the role of a professor or a teacher in many cases, but I've always maintained that to teach is to learn. And this is one of those moments where I've been learning a lot about the attitude and the lifestyle of a cybersecurity practitioner. And I want to sort of open the doors into those areas. What do you do in order to make sure that you are on top of the information that is out there, that you are generating the knowledge base that you require? There's never a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to gathering information and thinking it through, but what are your own practices of feeding out the noise and taking in what you need in order to run your practice?
Right. Great question. There's a lot of noise in security. There's a lot of brand new findings every single day. And what I do is, I'm not a practitioner myself anymore, but at the same time, I want to be close to what it is that's happening in the practitioner's world. So I keep an eye on the new CVs that are coming out, the impact they have. If Windows is impacted in such a way that it's going to impact a lot of the organizations that I'm working with, I want to know exactly what that vulnerability is, how to patch it. So I spend time reading on it.
Yep.
I read exactly what the patch is going to be when it came out, what it would take to actually implement it, what it would take to fix it. So I still go back to the basics every time I need to. So I learn every single day.
You know, one of the things that I've also drawn out of this really fluent conversation that you've shared with me is the aspect of a CISO, not just being C for chief, but the CISO being a good communicator. And often we find that, you know, some of us are able to communicate in person. We read body language, we read silences, etc. Now in this world of being a virtual CISO, you've had to do a lot of things via Zoom. You've had to do a lot of things via email. How have you made sure that you're getting the point across? And I also want to sort of layer on another aspect of this. And I do apologize if it comes a little bit left field, but you know that in the Cyber Exchange, we have an entire day dedicated to women in cybersecurity. I want to throw in the fact that how did gender impact or not your position as a virtual CISO?
This question has been asked of me so many times. What's it like to be a woman in cybersecurity?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I don't think like that. I think of myself as a person in security.
Yep.
I give it my best. I learn just like anybody else learns, and then I just apply myself.
Yep.
I will say that I have heard from a lot of other women that they feel that it's a struggle to fit in, to feel like they fit in, because predominantly it's not exactly diverse. Not just kids and women and children. It's just not very diverse today. So I don't think about it too much, to be honest with you. But I am mindful of other women when they come up to me and say that we want to know what it's like to be in cybersecurity as a woman. So I can only tell them that if you ask a nurse what it's like to be a nurse in a hospital, they would have an experience. If you ask a CISO what it's like to be a CISO for a large organization, they would have a personal experience. My personal experience has been wonderful. It's been amazing. I'm a learner. On my day one in school, I walked into my first class, and one of my very good friends today, he basically said, she doesn't belong in here, does she? She's in the wrong class. And we all chuckled about it. And I was the only woman in there. And I basically smiled, and I sat, and basically we just started talking. And they're like, hey, you know what you're talking about. You know about security. The only thing is sometimes women get asked the question, are you technically savvy? Are you technically good? And a lot of women tell me that that's a question that irks them. And they don't feel comfortable, that they don't feel it's a fair question. They feel that this is not a question you would ask a fellow guy, but you would ask a woman. So that's the only question I've heard from a lot of women that's bothered them in security.
Sure.
Other than that, to be honest, my experience has been amazing. I used to be part of women's organizations that were trying to get more women in there, in the security sector, and I will still continue to support them.
I think it's crucial that everybody takes in, from an audience perspective, how you've punctuated your career by not just making sure that you have your own position and your own stance and your own playbook with cybersecurity, but you've punctuated it with these moments where you have mentors in place, where you have a community in place. And this is where I want to get into your own involvement in the community. We'll just park that on the side just for a little bit, because no individual is an island.
Yep.
And you formulated a company, you formulated these services. How have you built your team around you?
Right, so I was already working with the people that are part of my team today, but we were working on our own. We were all
Right.
working on our own, and we all basically decided that this is a good time that we work together. We think a lot alike. We are very passionate about security. One thing I look for in a person to join my team, you have to be naturally excited about security. Either you have to be very excited about privacy
Yep.
or security, or one of the two, or mix. They go hand in hand. And when the passion is there, we gel.
Right.
We make things happen.
I think it's, again, very crucial to look at how you've focused on the fact, and this is very similar to what Michael Ball and myself were talking about, is that often we hire for skill, and then we fire for fit. And this is a statement that a local company here in Durham region, Durham Recruiting, their CEO, Dustin Kello, often repeats to us. And it's about how you've punctuated your relationships with other leaders in the space, other upcoming leaders in the space, that you're able to not only just see for skill, but you can see the fit through the passion that they exude, through the participation that they have on forums like cyberexchange.ca, through their involvement in different advisory committees, so on and so forth. That giving back culture and knowing that value exchange that comes from participating in different forums. I want to now delve a little bit further into this aspect of how you sort of build your teams and how you've picked the right fits and the right skills. How much does certifications, in your perspective, matter to your level of success in the world of being a very sound cybersecurity practitioner, or at least a consultant?
So I'm not going to give you a conventional answer here. I'm not big on academic background. I'm not really that big on certifications to be the only indicator for somebody's knowledge, their skill set. In almost in every cool task that I've taken on, I was given an opportunity to demonstrate my skill hands-on. And in one interview, I remember I was given a laptop and a script to produce something. And I had about 15 minutes to do it.
Wow.
And I couldn't complete it in the 15 minutes. So I basically took it home, and it took me 3 minutes when I was on my own computer to just get it done, and I just sent it back to them, say, hey, this is now done. What I do is I look at people, I ask them the question, are you excited about learning how to do it? Not if you already know it, but do you feel like you want to learn about this? And if you don't even feel like learning about it, you will not be passionate about the journey. But if you want to learn, it can be anything. If you don't know it today, you'll know it by the time we need you to know it.
A common thread across all of our conversations has been this aspect that I can't teach you anything, I can only get you to think.
Right.
If I can get you to think about the right things and you can parlay that to me, it's a very good start of growing that relationship with your team and building your team. And I think you've also made a very important point around the aspect of companies investing in their staff, or even small teams making sure that we have access to more conferences, to more learning opportunities. But it really comes down to the attitude that you present at the table, which really is 99% of the recipe of success, I would argue. We've got a couple of more minutes, and I want to delve into a little bit about your own sort of frequencies of thought with relations to where the cybersecurity industry is going to right now. I'll take 30 seconds just to summarize what I've understood. You have a passion for privacy. You have a passion for understanding risk mitigation. You've also got a very acute eye on business continuity planning. I want to go through, where do you see, for example, now with this hyper-digitized environment that we're in, where do you see issues of privacy heading to?
Right, that's a bold question. Privacy, for me, we have already divulged so much information on unprotected platforms today that we are going to play a catch-up.
Yeah.
If as an individual, even as organizations, if we want to put a protection around privacy, first we must understand what needs protection. What is impacted by privacy violations? What is a privacy violation to begin with? Yeah. So first, it's an understanding of what is it that you need to protect. Then comes the question, how do you protect it? So right now, we are in the process of understanding the implication of privacy. So I don't think we're quite there where we're ready to say, okay, this is what needs to be protected, and now let's just put a security control around it or put a process around it. We're still in the process of divulging a lot of information through mobile apps, through platforms that are spinning up every day. I tease the software developers to say the speed at which they're writing software is the speed at which they're introducing vulnerabilities in the world.
Yep.
So this is my battle with a lot of developers to say, please take a moment to write secure code, not just code.
If I can add to that, I think, with the way you parlayed your position on this and the way you sort of oscillated between both the technical folks as well as the operational folks, although I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea of this person is a techie and that person is not, and I believe you're in the same camp of thought as myself, the one thing that I will say is that where I see things going is everybody sort of looks for that, well, there's an app for that. Everybody looks for an automated solution for any issue that they're facing from a risk perspective. And I think now, as we've in this pandemic and in the new normal, one of the things that's happening is that we're realizing that computers have a genuine problem, is that they only give you answers. They don't ask any of the questions. And we need to understand that, and we need to humanize the experience of cybersecurity. We'll take another 2 more minutes now to talk a little bit about, you talked about business continuity. And in light of the pandemic, so on and so forth, with so many companies now moving to remote workforces, spread out, diverse workforces, different countries, different nation states, etc. How are you getting involved in helping companies with understanding how they can manage their workforce when it's not just spread across a particular region, but spread across borders as well?
Right. So a lot of the companies have actually demonstrated very good due diligence in letting their remote employees know that this is your responsibility to the company and this is what's our accountability to you. So there's been a lot of transparent conversations to say that this is how we're going to work now. To be honest, people working from home are on their own networks that are not secure in any way, shape, or form. So encouraging them to use VPN should have already been a standard long before they even left their offices, but now it's even more so that if you're not on a VPN, you should not be allowed anywhere on the company information assets. So that's a swift change that if an organization is falling behind, they're opening up their risk factors to so many more things that are unprecedented. What we've done essentially is we've expanded the threat landscape to a very large scale. We don't know the nature of the next series of attacks that are going to come our way. They are in preparation. The perimeter's exploded. So now, if we wait to see what happens, if all our employees are kind of secure, it's going to be too late.
That statement, the perimeter has exploded, contrasts very neatly with what Mark Dillon said. Mark Dillon is on our committee as well. He is the Vice President of Information Technology for Waterloo Hydro, and his comment was the perimeter is dead. I actually want to take this a little bit serious, that the perimeter is constantly being detonated. And sometimes, and I'm sure this question will come up quite frequently, and I can almost hear a lot of my students asking this question, is that it's detonating because some of the threats and some of the challenges are now insider threats as well. So while you're looking on the outside for what's attacking you, there's something going on the inside, and you need to have those eyes and those perspectives. In your opinion, though, at what point is it that we say to ourselves that, okay, the perimeter is shifting, there are lots of different things that are happening, but at what point do we say that we're actually completely secure? Or is it just that, hey, we've just reduced the risk a little, and we continue to try to reduce the risk?
I would be the last person in the industry to say to absolutely anyone if they're ever going to be completely secure. You only mitigate for the risks, and the risk keeps changing. It keeps evolving. So you have to constantly learn what's the next thing and how to mitigate against it. So there's never a state of being completely secure. If you lock everything down, even if you air gap it, even then, there's certain risk factors that are inherently in place. So you can never be of that mindset that now I'm completely secure. You should always be in the mindset that how else can I mitigate the risks that I don't know today? Learn about what's coming your way, learn about the trends, and then you can prepare yourself proactively.
I think that keyword of proactiveness has to sort of be the signature breakfast, lunch, and dinner for every company at this point of time. And I also think is that the dictionary that you've provided for us in terms of thinking through what are the different layers within our companies, where do we need to be understanding our security postures, I think that comes off very eloquently in everything that you just said. And I have to admit that this seems to come from consistent reading, consistent learning. If there's one book or one movie that you would recommend to our audience, what would that be?
A movie for cybersecurity? I mean, all the hackers like Hacker.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, if it interests you, so I was talking to Kat Kood not too long ago, and when we were talking about movies and literature and art that we would like our audience to consider, she pointed out Indian matchmaking on Netflix.
okay.
And she was talking about the biodata that the auntie was carrying around everywhere and matching people with. So anything, it can be something humorous as well. Go for it.
Honestly, I'm drawing a blank here.
So how about this then? Let's do this. You're on the cyberexchange.ca platform.
Right.
When you get some time, now why don't you post on that? What is a book or a video that you would recommend? Post it on the wall there, and I'm
All
sure
right.
that
I'll
our
do that.
community would interact with you. And with that, Sarah, before I take your leave and thank you, I'm going to try my level best to summarize in 30 seconds everything that we've just talked about. To the audience, you've heard me say this consistently, is that the only constant is change. But you have to also have this vision for what's coming ahead. You know, dreams are not something that let you sleep. Dreams are something that do not let you sleep, that keep you awake, that keep you excited. If there's one thing I know about Sarah, is that if she is working with you or if she is part of your committee, she's always there, always connected, always available. And you've always heard me say this, that the greatest thinkers, the greatest practitioners work with the door open. I thank you, Sarah, for being open with us today. I thank you, more importantly, for taking the time to come to the beautiful town of Ajax. I know you came from pretty far. You likely needed a passport to come all the way here, but we deeply appreciate it. To the audience, I look forward to hosting you at another Power Hour. And once again, Sarah, thank you for your time, and we will definitely be doing more of these as we continue to grow our Cyber Exchange community at cyberexchange.ca. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.